All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Welcome to another Showcase AMA here on the Polygon Discord. Today we got um, Copernic. We have the CEO and co-founder Grant. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me and good to keep doing collaborative things with Polygon and its community. So thanks for having me once again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a cool hat you got. I like that.
Appreciate it. Kind of a signature for me at this point for years in the crypto space. So thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Super fired up to have you here and learn more about Copernic. But before we jump into Copernic, what's your background? What's your history? What were you doing before crypto and what got you into the space?
Uh, so I'm originally kind of a musician, been doing that since I was about four, but that's what partially got me into the digital media tech space. So my first startup when I was 19 was focused on actually creating distribution and monetization systems and platforms for digital media, music, video, etc. This is like 2005, 2006, so we're playing around with mobile video before the iPhone was out. And that's really what actually got me into blockchain tech very early. I've been in it for around a decade, 2012-ish, 13-ish, because I viewed it as kind of a foundational layer or like a systemic infrastructure for how digital value or IP will be distributed, monetized, tracked, traced, etc. So that's how I got into this tech. Unfortunately, I didn't get into it from a speculative aspect. That's kind of not the person that I really am. So I've always been focused on how to build solutions using this technology or build solutions for the market that this technology is creating. So eventually, I also became a co-founder and chief marketing officer for about 4 or 5 years of CoinFirm, which is one of the global leaders around analytics for crypto and blockchain assets. But I'm third generation aerospace. So this Copernic space thing isn't some abstraction of trying to shove crypto up into space. It's a family legacy and a long lived mission of my life and my mother's life as well, who's also co founder of Copernic Space. And I'll get into some more details around that history and our story overall.
Fantastic. So you said you're a musician. What kind of music are you into?
I'm into lots of different types of music. Kind of depends on what phase I'm going into. But my music itself is kind of alternative rap, I guess you would call it. Some people kind of call it industrial rap. I actually kind of have call it crypto rap. It's a little bit of its own different sound. So you can find me under GB Savant when it comes to that, as far as an artist goes. So I still do that and even have like a label on the side.
That's pretty cool. If it's crypto rap, I wonder if you could do a track with a little bubble or something. Um,
A whole different side discussion. We'll try to keep it on
yeah,
Copernic space because
absolutely.
eventually
So
I will be sending music and enabling artists to send their music as digital files to the moon and into space and turn those into their own unique digital space assets. So that's some of the kind of cool commercial cases and applications we might discuss today.
very cool. Yeah. So I want to jump back to Copernic space. Honestly, when I was first looking into this, I was under the impression that it was more of a trading platform for space themed assets, but you're talking about like literal physical um, space industry assets. So yeah, let's dive into this. Why don't you tell us like what this is all about?
Sure, I can kind of even run through, let's say a presentation along with it if you like. Kind of give some visuals and some things for people to pull out.
Yeah, most definitely. I think visual representation is great, so that would be very helpful.
Okay, give me just 1 sec around that. Oh, one moment. This is the first time I've shared screen on Discord, so I'm still kind of getting the the hang of it, but I should. Oop, I have it right now. You guys see it? You see it okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, so back to that story. So I mentioned that it's this is a generational thing for us. So really, the story started with my grandfather, who helped build the space program in Poland, and he had these very progressive-minded guy. He had these early writings in the '60s, '70s around the idea of democratizing access to space, not as like a marketing term, but as something that he quite literally faced. So actually, about 6 years ago, my mother and I started conceiving what is now Copernic Space, which is we realized that space is going to be the largest, most valuable market in mankind's history, not just from an economic sense, but the solutions it's going to provide to life on Earth overall, but that it requires its own platform and kind of digital economy. It never went into the digital economy when it comes to commercialization or financing. So this has really fueled our mission in life and through Copernic Space to enable access, ownership, and utility for the wider commercial market and even the average person in the space economy, which once again is going to be the most valuable market in mankind's history. So our whole thing is making this market accessible and also affordable, and that's where cool things that we do with Polygon, such as fractionalization, et cetera, come in. So you can see that quote there about the barriers to entry to owning or launching, et cetera, satellites is quite high, but if we introduce certain models that tokenization, fractionalization, and platforms like ours introduce, then you can actually break it down so that the average person has access, ownership, and utility as well. It's important to note we're not an NFT project. So our whole thing is when you look at us and you talk about NFTs, don't look at it as how NFTs have been used or applied or viewed up until now, more so how NFTs are going to be a core technology and backbone to how digital markets and economies run in the very near future. So we use really NFTs as kind of these doors to this portal into space related assets, utilities, and investments, right? And another big thing is a lot of people don't understand space. They think it's kind of this abstract, unreachable thing that really involves a few billionaires like Musk, Bezos, and Branson and NASA. But in reality, there's around 10,000 space companies already in the private market. It's supposed to be $1 trillion market by the end of the decade. It's already a $500 billion market almost. And there's loads of pressure both from private investments as well as commercial companies that want to have access into space. So what have we built? We understood that there's two key things to, let's say, digitize, tokenize, and enable better access and markets to, which is commercialization. So enabling space companies to digitize, create real space assets with utility out of their products, services, ownership of payloads, satellite data, imagery, et cetera, and offer that to the commercial market on a digital platform, right? And also create space assets out of it. So there's a secondary market that creates a whole different type of revenue stream and liquidity in the space market that also enables the average person, once again, to have an even more accessible and beneficial access to the space economy. And the other one is financing. Both of these things are equally archaic in the space economy, which people don't realize. Like, for example, space companies, if you're doing something in space, it's usually like a year-long contract and it's multi-million-dollar contract. There's companies that when it comes to data, they're still putting data on hard drives, having their guy fly across the country and handing it to their partner on hard drives. It's a very archaic sort of market. And also from the investment end, it's extremely privileged. Investing into SpaceX is hard unless you have privileged sort of access. And it's extremely high intake, meaning it's big tickets. And if you're lucky, your liquidity event for your investment is like 10 years, right? So there's huge amounts of value in digitizing, tokenizing, and open up investments into these space ventures or the space assets themselves, and creating secondary market for both those assets as well as investments, right? So what are we really doing? This is where space companies can tokenize, once again, their assets, introduce utility into it, and list it on our marketplace. This creates this open and easy access, and they can fractionalize them as well, once again, right? So this creates a more open and easy access for the commercial and the retail market to not just buy them, but also utilize them and trade them if the original asset creator space company enables it to be traded on the secondary market, right? So once again, we focus mainly on two things: commercialization and financing, bringing DeFi to space, right? The first thing we're launching is the commercialization end. So the marketplace that enables these companies to tokenize and list their space assets, right? And we focus on a few verticals for the first couple years, right? And the first one that we're starting with is actually the moon. So very here soon, and you can already join these wait lists. We're going to enable the public to have access, ownership on the moon, but also the capability to create their own lunar assets out of the ownership of space that they have on the moon. And later on, after I'm done presenting, our CTO will jump in, Philip, and he'll show actually on the platform how buying physical access and ownership to a lander or a rover on the moon is going to look and work on the platform. But we have a whole slate of partners and upcoming sales across different verticals. Once again, we're not just focused on enabling people to buy access and ownership and send things to the moon or in space, but also the commercial market. And for example, even the average farmer to acquire satellite data, right? And this is once again where this fractionalization, et cetera, comes in. Because instead of having to spend a year and $1 million on a contract to acquire satellite data through Copernic Space, you'll be able to see listings, buy those licenses to actually access those data sets, and instead spend a few $100s on X amount of photos instead of these massive contracts and licenses, right? And what I mean by utility with NFTs and how we're introducing this, into Polygon, et cetera, is, for example, with satellite data, if you buy an NFT that represents a license to access satellite data, you will actually access that data or the API to access that data through the NFT on our marketplace. So that's introducing true utility into the NFT space by using space, no pun intended, right? But something we've launched already in the meantime, which is pretty vibrant and really cool, and something that we've invested years into, is something we call Spaceables now. But we've been investing into space art, collectibles, artists. We did the first ever physical NFT space art exhibition. We did that in Palm Beach in Florida the other year. We launched Spaceables, which is the first digital market for space art, collectibles, music, even digital fashion, etc. And you can literally go to Spaceables right now. Do you guys still see my screen right now for the Spaceables?
Yep.
Okay, so this is where you have the global space creator community minting and listing their space creations for the global market to consume. And just so you guys know, for everyone here, we're going to be giving some Matic so you can list and mint your Spaceables on us. So if you would like to do that, please join our Discord. You can find all of that on our Twitter, and through our Discord, you give us your address, and we'll send you the Matic, and you can mint your Spaceables on the Spaceables side of the marketplace on our platform, right? So this is something that's active, that's already, people are buying and selling things on it. The financing end, next year we come out with Space Pool. So this is where we're enabling space ventures to tokenize themselves or their assets for financing. The reason we're doing this later is because these are going to be securities. These are going to be clean investments in different type of tokenized models and formats. And we're still going to be using NFTs in a variety of ways. So look forward to this next year as well. But right now we're focused on launching Space Mart and these historic space cases. Um, Once again, by the end of the year, we're looking to launch a few more of these digital payload sales that are going to the moon, and then working on the International Space Station one, while we also work with our partners on satellite cases. So over the next year and a half, we're going to have multiple cases launching. A little bit more about myself, as you already learned about my background a little bit. But rounding out kind of the lead team, my mother is actually the co-founder, which is Lady Rocket. That's what she's known as in the space economy. Kind of Silicon Valley veteran, brought the American computer industry into Central Europe after communism fell, and has really been a visionary around startups and especially the space market over the past 2 decades. So a lot of the early doors open and the early vision, especially, is built by Lady Rocket. Someone you're going to hear from in a second is Philip. Philip's worked with me for years, worked with me at CoinFirm as well. So he's been building complex products around crypto for years with me as well. And recently Brian also joined to kind of be our bridge, help bridge these space assets with the wider commercial and brands market. So really me, Lady Rocket, and Brian focus a lot on being the bridge between the commercial, the crypto and the retail market and the space economy. And our advisory board is quite interesting as well. We have people on it such as Kevin O'Connell, who's the former director of space commerce at the United States Department of Commerce. So this is someone that's been fighting both in government as well as in the private market to push actually the privatization and kind of the private commercialization of the space economy. Everybody on our board has some sort of function, whether they help around financing, company structure, or for example, Kevin and Bobby are focused more on space, space data, and not just legitimizing us within the highest levels of the space economy, but also helping us with our partners and our solutions. And when it comes to partners and supporters, you see Polygon there. So we've been, working with you guys for quite a while now. So we have leaders from both the space as well as the crypto market. And you can even find us on NASA's website. We're hosted there if you kind of want to see what we were like early on in our story. But I wanted to end it with a quote from Kevin. Actually, I asked him, Kevin, why did you join us after like 30 minutes of sitting with me? And we met in DC when I was speaking at a conference. And I said, can you give me some kind of quotes? And he gave me a bunch of quotes. And one reason I use this one is because there's billions of dollars in value in just digitizing, streamlining, creating more efficiency in the commercialization of the space market. It's really a multi-billion-dollar value by itself. But we're not only enabling that, we're enabling access, ownership, and the capability for the space market to be generating millions of transactions a day, as opposed to kind of the model is now. And the way it's going to be generating millions of space-based transactions is by enabling every single person who's on this call, for example, to also have access and the capability to transact with space assets and investments. So how can you get involved right now? Spaceables, signing up for our wait lists, and we are going to be coming out with what we call our space passes. So these are Copernic Space NFTs that give a bunch of utilities within the platform, whether it's removing transaction fees, automatically being whitelisted on space sales, having membership into different space organizations. So we'll be coming out with that soon, and you can also join waitlists that are tied to that. All of those wait lists are either available through our social medias or the website copernicspace.com. So thank you, for going through that with me. I'd actually, I'd be happy to open up to any questions real quick. And then I'm happy to have Philip present kind of how this platform actually looks and works. So Zanzi, do you have any comments or questions for me before we continue?
Well, yeah, for one, like I think that was like awesome. Everything you were showing, it's super cool. I guess I'm like curious, like, um, who's supplying like the space assets? I guess for people to
Oh,
invest into, and like,
question. Yeah, great question. So we're a Web3 marketplace in the sense of we're non-intermediary or custodial around the assets, funds, etc. So these are not our assets. We enable space companies to host their assets on our platform. So look at us more like, how eBay was in the early web commerce is like eBay's not creating and listing their own assets, generally speaking, right? So this is actually really great for space because there's no intermediaries, middlemen dealing with sensitive data, assets, but we do control the entry points, right? So we have that's from two sides, both from the buyer user end as well as from the supplier space company end. From the supplier space company end, it's called KYM, which means know your material. That's just us verifying whether this space company has the rights, the capability to commercially offer the space asset or eventually themselves for financing on the platform. And the other end, we do have KYC elements on the platform because, for example, a US space company can't sell access or ownership to Chinese companies or nationals, for example. So these are things that we've implemented in our product, both on the primary as well as the secondary market of our product, to be able to control for those things, control quality of assets, and actually build a real solution for the space economy that can last decades.
incredible. Yeah, guys, if you have any questions for Grant, feel free to drop them in the text chat. I'll read them out for him. And
Yeah. Let's show off the physical payload, how it's going to look when you want to physically send something to the moon. Because the cool thing about what we're doing is we're not just enabling the commercial or the retail market to, for example, buy the capability to send something to the moon, right? That is happening. And you do get an NFT that represents those rights, access, ownership of the physical or the digital space, etc. But we also enable you to transform that NFT to represent, for example, your actual cargo. So if you're physically sending something or digitally sending something, like I mentioned, music, right? Let's say I send a music file to the moon on a lunar lander. That NFT can be transformed to then represent that music file, and then I can fractionalize and resell ownership and access of my music that is quite literally on the moon. But that's a case of something that's digital. It can be software, so it can represent a service. On the physical end, it could be, a Nike shoe, or it could be something like a physical Ethereum node. And these are all real cases that we're talking about, that we're going through. So if it's cool, I'll have Philip kind of quickly show the highlights of how that process looks and works, and how within the next 2 quarters, actually, you'll be able to do this for digital payload, for digital cargo files, etc. That's cool with you, Zanzi.
yeah, absolutely. Are they in here right
Yep.
now? Do I need to?
Yep, he is.
What's their username?
Mr. 13 Tech.
What?
Okay.
There you go.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to share the screen. Do you see the screen?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, guys. So I want to present the physical payload use case, what Grant just mentioned. So the idea is to streamline and digitize the process of the real space company, and the use case we want to show off is the payload, right? So let's imagine that this is a company who has payload services to deliver your cargo or parcel to the moon, right? And they register their asset in the form of digitized uh, token on the Polygon network. So this is the presentation of the asset. It has a lot of metadata. The most interesting part that we extended the like typical NFT with more with more business-related data, such as documentation and files. So users can create the assets and tie some technical specifications of their product and services within the asset. Like here, we do have some files attached to the asset, right? Based on that asset, users can create the listing. So we will have this is the view for the seller. So we have some progress, history, and data in terms of like prices and how much supply is on the sale. So that's pretty it from the seller side. And what I want to show you off the whole process from the buyer and seller perspective, how to acquire a real physical payload based on use case that we have provided successfully already. So right now I'm going to switch to the buyer perspective. This is the buyer account, so it is connected to a different wallet. We are in our SpaceMart module. We do have this listing, what I've just shown you from the seller side. We can see all the information here. We can select how much grams do we need. Let's say we want to get the 100 grams from this payload. And we want to register our own payload in the form of NFT based on this 100 grams. So by clicking requesting, we can proceed further.
Yeah, important to know, with these payloads, et cetera, these space companies need to understand what you're physically or digitally trying to put on their craft, right? So we've built a process that enables these space companies to receive those details, verify those details, go back and forth with the commercial entity if needed, and eventually approve to mint the actual NFT, right? So once again, we built something to reflect the realities of commerce in real life.
Yes. So here we have our data from our profile. We can extend this with a description and some documentation for the request. The next step is really important. So this is something we call a child asset, but technically this is registration of your own payload in the form of NFT. So we can set all the cover image, the additional media as we call it. We can link some YouTube videos if we want. We can name our assets. So let's say we are sending our small IoT probe on the moon rover to probe the space, right? Let's have some description for this, right? Description for the demo. We also can attach any documentation. So that's the form. After we request, we will have the request view of ours, right? So because this is as Grant just mentioned, this is a real process from the seller perspective. It's a real business process, right? It's not just an instant buy. So we have to request first, and then we have to wait till the seller will approve our request, right? So right now I will switch back to the seller perspective. So I'm connected now as a seller wallet. I go back to my profile. So I see here that we have a new request for the payload, all the information, who is requesting, which asset of mine is being requested, how much, what's the price I will get. And the most important information here, we have all the metadata of this child NFT that we are going to approve in a second. We can extend this to see all the information about this data. And now the process is pretty simple, yet not so far for the crypto. But this deal process is highly customizable. So right now it has 2 steps. As a seller, we are sending our service agreement. If we accept this request, next step is to share our service agreement. So I'm sending the service agreement through the platform.
To note, depending on the type of sale, these service agreements and things like that won't be required or will be necessary, right?
Yeah, this is a highly customizable steps. We will have custom steps for different use cases. Right now I'm going forward. So we have signed, let's say we have signed service and agreements. Now I'm sending invoice as seller. because we want to do it as an off-chain payment. But this can be replaced, of course, with the on-chain payment with the cryptocurrencies. Let's say I receive as a buyer, I receive the invoice. I create my digital signature, kind of stating that I have paid the invoice. So right now I'm creating the digital signature, which will be to seal the deal. And then on the seller perspective, I can see that there is a notification about invoice was paid. Actually, each of this step will generate notification for the both sides, because as it will happen in real life asynchronously within the participants. So there are notification system, and this is the last step. So right now, as a seller, I have the notification that my invoice was paid. I can see it, and now I will create the child asset to the buyer. So it will pop up the transaction. We will sign this up, and what it will take the portion of the asset which represents payload, burn selected amount that buyer requested, and mint a new asset with a new metadata, and there is a parent-child relationship between those assets, right? So right now we have a pending transaction status. We can check it on the Polygon scan on the testnet. It will be confirmed soon. Okay, so transaction is successful. We can switch back to the request to the buyer side. We can see the transaction was successful. We can check it on the Etherscan. So as I just said, we took portion of our asset, we burn it, and then we minted the very same amount, but with a new ID. So it's a unique ID for the unique asset to represent the child asset. In our case, this is the IoT probe 1337, right? I can go to Vault to check it out in my Vault. Here it is. So I have the whole NFT representing my payload, which is based on original payload from the Moon company, which provides this service of delivering the payloads, right? And now I can start reselling this and commercialize it in my own ways. So that's the process. If you have any questions, please. All right.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, super easy and smooth. I totally agree. Yeah, that was awesome indeed. Yeah, Frankie. Cool. So I guess like one question that I
Yeah,
have.
important. Just
Oh, sorry.
oh, my bad. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, important to note from what Philip had just shown is that from then on out, that user then has their own unique. They just created their own unique space asset that they themselves can then further fractionalize and resell to their community, their base. So once again, you can physically or digitally send something up, transform your ownership of that space to represent whatever you filled with that space, and then fractionalize, add your own utilities, and resell that to your community or market further on our marketplace, right? So it's not just the capability to buy a space asset, it's on the basis of that space asset, create your own space assets that you can sell further on that's tied to the original one.
So my question would be, um, what are some of the ways like you're most excited to see your platform be utilized?
I love SAT data. I'll let Pilla please answer this yourself. I love SAT data. Why is, well, first off, we like what we call like digital space assets. So things that aren't tied towards a physical thing, because they're much more kind of scalable, right? They don't have the limitations that physical things have. But SAT data is amazing because if you really streamline and kind of democratize access, to sat data, it's going to change a lot of stuff on Earth. I mean, a lot of people see it, for example, from a climate or agricultural sort of lens. I brought that example up earlier, where like the way sat data is acquired nowadays is generally blocks out 99.9% of the market from being able to do it. And if we create these kind of standards, just like we created like a digital standard for physical and digital payload with what Philip just showed you, um, where you'll be able to send in your files directly through our platform. They get approved, they get sent, you transform it. So when it comes to the satellite data aspect, being able to come on, buy a license for 10 photos, access those 10 photos, right? And if we don't use some part of the license, you can try to sell it on later on. But the whole point of really democratizing access to satellite imagery and data is going to be a game changer for everybody on Earth, in every industry on Earth. So I'm really excited about delivering that with some of our partners like Sfera. We also brought on recently Patterson Aerospace, which focuses on space debris, right? Which is a very hot topic. Like, we've already polluted Earth and now we're polluting space. How are we going to, deal with this issue? It's going to create a lot of problems, etc. So really creating, like, look at us as like the economic infrastructure for space. It's just where we're adding real kind of utility to these assets.
From my perspective, satellite data is, of course, major player here because there's a real use case. There are solutions like artificial intelligence and categorization algorithms which can trigger some notifications about fires, about pipe collisions, etc. But those companies, they don't have access to live stream of satellite data, and this is the issue within the market. But on the other hand, we do have other candidates for next use cases. One of my favorites is satellite sharing, right? So there is also a use case that we can monetize. We can have the access to create images from satellite on a request, right? So this is a real company. This is their service of theirs, but it's hard to get them acquired. So through the platform, they will have a simple monetization process for their side, and users can just request to make some pictures of their own houses just for fun, for example. But of course, there are also practical usages for such service. And another use case is subscription for whether it's an intellectual property or some data sets, because we do believe that subscription format is really unique on the secondary market, because if I have access to some data set for the space debris, for example, right, to build a road for the rocket, and I already used it, I can resell it on the secondary market, my subscription, which is still active. Yeah.
I want to go back to Frankie's question, and they're just wondering how you came up with the name Copernic Space.
Yeah, I see some of Frankie's questions. Thanks for the questions, Frankie. So as I mentioned, kind of our history, we have Polish roots. I built, although we started really building Copernic Space like 6 years ago in some manner, Web3 tech, and even more importantly, market mentality wasn't mature enough. So we built this during COVID times, and I've spent a lot of this time in Warsaw as well. So like very deep roots, Polish roots with this company. And in Polish, Copernicus, so Nicholas Copernicus in Polish is Copernic. You don't say Copernicus, you say Copernic. So we just kind of Anglophiled it and put a C on the ends of it. And that's kind of the origin story of Copernic Space, is that it's actually saying Copernicus in a Polish way, just with a C. But weirdly enough, after Copernic Space, there's been a few other Copernics that came out. So I'm curious where they came up with it as well. But we're the only one that's space oriented.
Yeah, trendsetter. Foxy's got a bunch of questions, so I'll just read them all out. So, to what extent are the SAT data would the SAT data be available, and is retrading of that data plausible? If so, what about tampering and inflation related to the data and the assets?
Yeah, all good questions. So listen, in the beginning, we're really looking to set standards for certain verticals in the market. So like I mentioned, we just kind of we built a standard for physical and digital payloads, and among the next ones is building some initial standard for SAT data. So for us, we're less focused on exactly what the data is. We're more so focused on the standard and the mechanism and model enabling the commercial market to discover, request, acquire, utilize, and to your second question, trading. They're trading actually more of license and access to that data, less so than the data itself. And really, that's all up to the original asset creator. So we're not here to dictate um, things for all our users. We're here to provide the tools, features, and functions that enable them to regulate, control their assets the way that we see fit. So just like I mentioned, that U.S. space companies can't trade with Chinese nationals on our secondary market as well, right? So we had to figure out a way to enable the blocking of Chinese nationals in sanctioned countries being able to buy space assets of American companies on secondary market. The thing around satellite data licenses, they're probably a little less secondary market tradable than some other types of space assets. Like Frankie brought up earlier on, he said something asteroids and gold, or like physical payload, or something like that. My guess is they're a little less tradable on the secondary market. But once again, if it's tradable on the secondary market, is less so up to us and more so up to the original asset creator. Tampering. So one of the biggest values of applying blockchain tech to this whole scheme is, once again, we're non-intermediary around the assets, the data, etc. So they are selling this to an identified entity on the other end, and there's nobody in between them, right? So one thing Philip is heavily focused on coming up into the end of this year and going into next year is really locking down these kind of security and data elements between space companies and their licenses and the data, right? So as far as tampering, there's no one in between to tamper it with, unless we're talking about you sell the license to somebody and then you leave some loophole for them to tamper with something in there. Maybe Philip wants to speak on that a little bit more, but that's because of how our platform's set up. Like, a lot of concerns are not our concerns, right? So for example, like from a regulatory aspect, just like Zonzi asked, like about are these our space assets? They're not our space assets, so we don't have to worry about the regulatory things that the space companies have to do to create these assets, right? So Philip, I don't know if you want to add to the tampering thing, but you want to say something? Okay, I guess not. Um,
I mean, can
uh,
you elaborate
yeah.
the question? Because tampering is a broad
Well, I think
definition.
I understood what he meant. Maybe he can type something else that's a little bit more, or say something, I don't know. And let's see, tampering and inflation related to that data, and it's no, I guess
If you're
respond.
if we are talking about the security aspect and accessibility for the data, there are emerging concepts, so-called perma-web, standing from permanent web access. One of the examples is, of course, IPFS with a pinning service explicitly, because IPFS by itself is not permanent, but pinning service is making data more of a permanently accessed. Also, there are alternative solutions such as Arweave, Filecoin, Swarm, Storage. So there are many decentralized solutions for the data access to make it permanent and without possibility that some centralized entity can tamper it actually. So it is hash proven that the like origin of the data is proven by hash or by data structures such as Merkle tries. And having that said, we plan to leverage those data structures and the technology to store that data. So companies can encrypt their data sets, create a listing on the platform to sell the NFT, which will serve as an access key to the data itself. They can set some preview of the data, like data samples, right? So you can determine whether the data quality is suitable enough for your business. If it is, you can acquire the NFT, use it as a key to access the data which is encrypted specifically for you. By having the NFT on your wallet, you can sign the request to get the access from the permanent web storage. And it's kind of proven mathematically that the data is the origin by the creator and it's not tampered by anyone else and is available for as long as network exists. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Awesome. Thank you for elaborating. One thing I'm curious about is what your thoughts are on decentralized science, which is like a topic Polygon DAO has been talking about quite a bit recently. And like, I don't know, the reason I asked that is you were talking about like democratizing the space industry, and that's what it like reminded me of, was like decentralized science. So I was just like curious to hear what your thoughts are on that subject.
I can answer this.
Before you continue, Philip. Philip, one thing he's really passionate about is the stage among our development. We see our development in a few amounts of stages. One of them is called collaboration, which is, I don't know when exactly we'll end up being able to implement that, but we're already enabling and really already in some manner of decentralized kind of financing of the progress of science, right? So, or decentralizing and democratizing, right? So even by being able to take, these very advanced, expensive space assets, allowing them to be fractionalized and offer real utilizable access, ownership to them for the average person, so to say, it fulfills that. Also, when we get into our space pool, that will be a way to where the general public in a democratized manner can finance and get different types of assets back with secondary markets behind them for investments or funding. And in the beginning, and Philip and I were just discussing this strategically about when we're going to launch this first one, probably Space Pool will be launched with cases we kind of for now like call kudos, which means that it's good for like nonprofits or education-based projects, science-based projects, for them to be able to garner financing from the public market, retail, commercial market, and provide some sort of digital asset back. Maybe it has some utilities or some future sort of thing attached to it, but it's not an actual investment vehicle, right? So we're going to be doing various things like that. And we actually view ourselves as a certain foundation of what you're talking about. It's just we're focused exclusively on space. And then Philip, please continue.
Yeah, but actually decentralized science, I was lucky enough yesterday, right now on the Ethereum blockchain week in Berlin, and we've had a nice debate over the concept of decentralized science. So let's a little bit like what just Grant said, we also work in that direction initially from the decentralized finances aspect, but also we want to leverage the decentralization of the science aspects such as intellectual property, of course. But let's define this DeSci aspect, which emerging right now in the community. It stands for the idea that scientific papers and like academic papers works are not published by some journals which have some kind of a big entry point level, but rather is posted in and decentralized environment, and proven by some by universities as a legit source of like proving that this paper was by a student from this university, and maybe another university also proves this paper. Is this the DeSci what you're kind of referring to?
I don't know. It's just kind of like an emerging topic to me, so I was just like curious like what your thoughts were on it and like how you guys like kind of like fit into it.
Yeah. So I do believe, yeah, it's truly a new emerging topic, and it's not truly defined yet. But this use case, what I've just mentioned, is one of the hottest right now. But we've been talking about this aspect years ago, but from the way of intellectual property, right? So decentralized intellectual property management is one of our thoughts that we have to stay synchronized with, and we will definitely work in that direction also, because uh, NASA have, for example, an open database for intellectual property patents that you can apply and get access to it. But that process takes like a lot of effort, right? And we imagine if this process can be streamlined, so you can acquire this in a matter of click. For example, if you have your wallet supplemented with some uh, token which represents your profile, right? And if you have, let's say, some signatures from university or academical entities, that gives you access to get those intellectual property patents access right away, because you are proven to be into this academical world, right? So, and this is something I'm just coming out right now. So there are a lot of
Well, for example, there's billions of dollars in NASA IP and patents, and they've even 12 years ago or now 13, 14, they did a auction for a patent, right? So we have, like I said, we're focused on certain verticals. We think that it's about a 3-year curve to what we're doing just kind of becomes standard. Like you're doing something in space, this is how you do it. But if you try to do it all at once, you're going to fall apart. So we focus on executing verticals, build a standard with a partnered company, execute that, enforce that standard. Then you can onboard more under that standard for that vertical. So, physical payload, digital payload, satellite data. Then we start getting into financing and more of these IP and collaborative based sort of models that we're talking about right now.
That sounds like a solid roadmap, like you know, good good pipeline. I see Frankie was asking why did you guys choose the Polygon
Yeah.
platform and
Philip answered, you know, we're really applying fractionalization and real utility to it, and we're about democratization. So, for example, when Philip was showing the product, like we allow for off-platform, invoicing and on-chain, but that on-chain stuff doesn't mean that you actually have to pay with crypto, quote unquote. We're doing card integrations with various providers and partners so that you don't, other than hosting your assets, just having a wallet connected and hosting your assets, you don't have to actually have exposure with going to an exchange and buying crypto and then coming on here. One thing that we're hyper focused on is building as good of a user experience as possible. And as to what Philip mentioned around gas price, et cetera, it's more about the functionality that the gas price, et cetera, enables us to do around fractionalization and really enabling a wider segment of the commercial market to access space assets and not have to worry about the transaction itself, right? And yeah, obviously the other thing is we can come on and we can talk to your community and talk to some elements of the team. Of course, would always want more both community as well as Polygon's team itself support. But it's one of the benefits of working with you guys.
oh, awesome. Yeah, I love being on such a hands-on team. Like we're always like so hands-on with like every single project. It's really fun being a part of Polygon. Um Okay, well, we are starting to run a little bit short on time. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about already?
We have, some really cool things that, like I mentioned, people can become a part of right now. So, my biggest thing is for people to come on to Spaceables, sign up for our wait lists. I'll shoot some links here right now. There's also, we have a giveaway for a Digital Space, really rare Digital SpaceX mission patch. I'll send a link to that here as well, which was given to us by the leaders of the United States Space Force at Vandenberg Space Force Base when we were invited to meet with Kamala Harris about the space debris situation. So that's that giveaway form that you see right there. And yeah, thanks for sharing some of those links. But yeah, go on Spaceables, get into our Discord and share your address if you want to mint and list some space art, photography, etc. And of course, help us get the word out there. We think we're by far the coolest project building a real value on Polygon, and the only project really that can actually say going to the moon or to the moon in a literal sense when it comes to crypto. So I want to thank everybody who came on. I want to thank you, Zhao, for setting this up. Would love to come back and do it again once we launch, for example, the digital payload to the moon
Yeah,
sale.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, thanks to everyone, and thanks Philip for coming on and doing the demo and speaking so eloquently as well. And of course, if anybody has any questions, hit us up on the Discord. I'm in there at least once a day myself.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an amazing conversation. Really enjoyed talking about everything we did. All the links are in the chat, so everyone knows how to follow up, get involved, and I encourage you all to do so. Let's go to the moon. Looking forward to talking about it next time. And yeah, thank you so much. It's been great having both of you, and thanks everyone for joining in today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Cheers.